You've heard, perhaps, the old saying of the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, "You cannot step twice into the same river." In its original context, this was meant to convey that the world is forever in the motion of time, and that every moment comes only once. Where I've found this thought most powerfully applied is to reading, however. I frequently tell students that you cannot read the same book twice. Not because the words have changed, but because it is always a new you, with new experiences, who steps into those words. This, I think, is a nice way of thinking about reading. At the very least, it seems to give my students the impression that I am wise when I say it to them. But as someone who likes to hike a lot, and often crosses several rivers in a day, I have to admit that pretty quickly I tire of getting my feet wet. And that if I'm being honest, it doesn't matter to me much whether the river is the same as the last one or not. The water seems to soak me all the same. If there is a parable that we might have stepped into a few too many times, it would be the parable of the prodigal son. In a sense, this is a testament to its richness. The parable unfolds with all the dramatic tension of a play set out in 3 acts, introducing us to a cast of characters who feel, in a way, to be timeless. The younger son's thoughtless departure, the dramatic twist of the famine that sends him into poverty, his soliloquy among the swine that gives Prince Hamlet a run for his money. These all build a beautiful sense of tension. And of course, the heartfelt resolution of his father's running embrace, the apology of the son that is swallowed up before it is spoken by his father's joy. And then, at last, the setup for the sequel. The sullen resentment of the elder son, which threatens to jeopardize our happy ending. All of these moments come together, and even though we know they're coming, they do not lose their power to move us again and again. This parable is, at heart, a good story. But as a parable, as a story meant to do more than simply stir our emotions, no matter how you slice it, the story starts to feel the same. This is perhaps because the classic approach to this parable, and really to all of Jesus' parables, is to start assigning characters, like directors casting roles in a school play. Okay, God, you say, you get to play the father, and we will play the prodigal son. Or maybe we'll mix it up this time. We'll be the older son, our awful neighbor the younger, with God offering us a patient lesson on forgiveness and resentment. Whatever casting decisions we make, we start to psychoanalyze the characters, assigning motivations and emotions to them all. It doesn't take long to realize that this is an endless game that becomes somewhat arbitrary. Like a theater director forced to do the same play every year for budget reasons. Or the exhausted volunteer charged with nativity play yet again. We want to throw our hands up in the air and say, play whatever part you want. 3 Marys, 5 wise men, no baby Jesus, and 2 dozen angels. Sounds fine. The meaning behind this parable, and all the parables of Jesus, is that there are no meanings in the characters themselves. There are no parts. The only true entry point into the parable of the prodigal son is to abandon entirely the notion that we need to go looking for ourselves, for our neighbor, even for God, in the characters of the story. This is because our lives are so complex that they cannot be reduced to mere characters in a play. We are all too rich to serve narrative functions. In the 1,000 stories that make up our world, we have our exits and our entrances, and each of us in our time plays many parts. For consider for a moment your own lives. Who among us today is not the father of this parable? Is there no one today who is not wounded by the thoughtless decisions of another? Not grieved at a relationship that has spiraled out of control? Not waiting in hope for a reconciliation that we fear may never come? And yet who is not also the younger son today? For we have all acted recklessly, found ourselves at time out of our depths, realizing only too late that the wisdom we ignored was exactly what we should have heeded. And yet still, who is not also the elder son today? For we have all struggled not to resent the good fortunes of others. Someone else's lucky break that seems to cheapen our own hard work. We have each, at times, begrudged mercy when we weren't the ones who needed it. Put simply, every one of us is too complex to fit somewhere single in this story. We, you and I, are all the Father. We are the younger and elder sons. We are the pigs and the pods. We are the cloak and the calf. We have each experienced departure and return. We have each felt in their time rejection and embrace. The truth of this parable is the story itself, and that it didn't go all the ways it could have gone. For how often in life do we see circumstances less dramatic than these destroy families and relationships? Friendships ruined over less than half a fortune. Families broken apart by an unwillingness to forgive a slight, let alone a feud of this magnitude. Yet here in this parable, we behold miracle compounded upon miracle. The miracle of a reckless journey that ended safely, of a prideful spirit giving way to humility, of a love great enough to forgive a monumental injury. All these things are the true miracles of God, the miracles of the heart. These are, according to Luther, the things that are the greatest around us and that we always fail to see. When someone in Luther's time began to doubt the real presence of Christ's body and blood in communion, questioning how mere words could bring Christ into bread and wine, Luther replied by asking them, should it then be so amazing that he enters into bread and wine? Is not the heart much more tenuous and elusive than bread? Just as the miracle of communion takes place in ordinary bread and wine, and the miracle of baptism in plain and ordinary water, so too do the true miracles of God in our lives occur in places as seemingly mundane as the ventricles of the human heart. And yet we cannot but marvel at what can be accomplished there. That such a story as this seems possible to us, that we can resonate with such forgiveness, is a testament to the grace and glory of God. By all right, this parable should have gone differently. The son's journey should not have ended so well, just as the father's embrace should have been harder won and the elder son's protests more readily heeded. When you look at all the parts, they should not add up to this. If you think about it, the church is much the same. We are an organization of broken and disheveled people, and I'm not just talking about my morning routine. We come from different walks of life, different professions, different family backgrounds. Reason tells us that the love we experience here should not be this strong, that we should not be so bonded to one another. And yet it is, and yet we are. And no reason can explain these things. Yet we have become so accustomed to them that we forget their miraculous quality. We need parables like this to awaken us again to the miraculous works of God among us, to free us again to see in our darkest moment the light that surrounds us. Of course, such parables as this do not only remind us that God is at work among us. They are also the vehicle through which God does that work. As the playwright Bertolt Brecht says, art is not a mirror through which to view life, but a hammer by which to shape it. The mastery of such parables is that through them God shapes us, putting to death the old person in us and raising the new to life. Just as through Christ, the Word of God, God worked our salvation on the cross. Through the proclaimed Word, God works these miracles of reconciliation among us. The promise of God to you today is that reconciliation like this is the end of God's work among us. The friend who cannot forgive us, and for good reason. The family we can no longer love, and not without cause. The ex we can no longer stomach, for whom the feeling is mutual. The hometown we put far behind us, never to look back. All these broken things God refuses to let go of, promising that in the world to come, if not here today, all things will be reconciled in him. Like a great banquet, we will all feast together, each of us having been fathers and sons, brothers old and young, pigs and pods, cloaks and calves in one another's stories. And seated across from us will be those characters we least expected to see. It will be a living table, proving God's power to mend what is broken, heal what is wounded, bridge what is separated, unite what is divided, and to make all things new again. We as a church are those most in need of this promise. And we are also where the truth of its promise is experienced. We testify to God's love in what we say and is what is felt among us. The promise of reconciliation in this story is not just our hope, but our inheritance to taste here and now. In his Son on the cross, God proves how far God is willing to go for this promise to one day be made real. So let this promise union steel you for days to come. Hold it tight and be amazed at how much has already been fulfilled in your sight. For this and for all the graces of God, let the church say, Amen.